Okay. So today this session is for leaders. So you could be a district coordinator, a school-based leader in terms of learning leader or a team lead, as well as assistant principals, principals, directors, and that kind of thing. If you're a teacher and you're really, really curious about this, you can support your leaders by talking about some of the things that we might go through in here again to shift the dynamic potentially in your school. So we want to talk about possibilities. And so this is about the leadership side of it. So I'm Dr. Kathy Salmon, and I've just had my doctorate for 2 years now, specializing in English as an additional language learning in Alberta, is what I did my dissertation on, and the high impact strategies. And my dissertation is on, Google Scholar. If anybody wants to read 200 pages about EAL, fun times, or a summary. Right now, I am an education consultant working for the Alberta Professional Learning Consortia, the APLC, who's hosting today. And I also work for international schools and a couple school districts in Alberta. I retired 2 years ago as a principal from a school with the Calgary Board of Education, 1,000 kiddo middle school with 770 EAL learners. So I've lived and breathed this for sure. And prior to that in my career, I was an EAL specialist for the system as well, working with a bunch of different contexts. And so I'm happy to hang around at the end as you've got questions and stuff like that and talk about particular solutions as well. Um, and as I did the benchmark session yesterday, I was also one of the co-writers of the benchmarks, and I've worked for the government for a couple of secondments. So I'm excited to be with you. We're going to talk about the role of leaders and learner data, and then evidence-based strategies, and then some teacher observation criteria, which is some of the stuff I worked on in my dissertation, actually. So today we're going to understand the role of educational leaders in fostering inclusive learning communities, learn how to use the profile data to meet the needs, explore some evidence-based strategies to support the learners, and develop observation criteria to ensure effective teaching practices. So the role of leader. So if any of you were on my sessions yesterday, I like some participation because I want to know who's out there and a little bit of interaction so that at least I'm speaking to something that might be meaningful to you. So if you could just respond in the chat, your name, your role, what EAL learners you have in your context. Do you have 25%, 10%, 100%, a mix of proficiency levels, just that kind of thing, and any kind of considerations that you have. Like, for example, in a high school, you might have 80 EAL learners in all grades, and you're trying to get some programming going, but you don't have a critical mass. So just anything like that just kind of helps me understand your context. Alyssa. You were in the sessions yesterday. I think I was saying Jeffrey, so it's your last name. So hello, Alyssa. Uh, Hi, Gayleen. Okay, Nicole, grade 3. All are multilinguals. That's great. 12% EAL, 80% EAL. Yeah. Brand new K-9 with lots of EAL. Okay, so that'll be interesting. Starting at an EAL school, so a school with all 100% EAL then. Full EAL school. Okay, so this is right up everybody's alley then. That's great. Thanks to those who participated, and those who haven't yet can still slide in your answers. So that gives me a little bit of an idea about your backgrounds. So of course, your role is to create a supportive learning environment, model inclusive practices, and promote that shared vision. And for some of you with the new schools, you're creating that vision. Some of you may be running programs but don't really have a vision, or you want to shift gears. So it's thinking about what could it be, or what is it, and where do you want to shift to next. So your job is to set the tone for inclusion. And of course, multilingual kids are part of the world, and we want to make sure they feel seen and heard, and that their mother tongues and other languages are valued in the school. And of course, we want to build teacher capacity. One of the things I found in my study was that not all universities require English as an additional language courses, so they're optional courses still at universities. So not every teacher you have will have the training and experience. You have some teachers with the experience, but not necessarily the pedagogical background or theoretical instruction. And then you've got some brand new teachers who may or may not have taken the courses in university, and they lack the experience. So building that teacher capacity, and just like with kids, working with the strengths that you have on staff is the best way to go about that. And then having that accountability piece. So having some kind of requirement to take some action in the classroom. And so we'll talk about some of those things with our profile data, and then advocate for resources, because you do need a variety of materials to be able to differentiate instruction and provide intentional language instruction. So making sure there is resources so people can do the work that needs to be done. We want to also make sure you're providing professional development, and in the myriad of a million things to do, one of the best ways to do it is, you don't necessarily have to have a separate EAL thing, but how, when you're doing your PD, if you're learning about the social studies curriculum and how do we implement in the classroom, well, as you're doing that, you're doing some differentiation and identifying language as you do that. So while you're focusing on social studies, you can still think about, okay, we're going to be teaching this new curriculum to diverse learners. So as you're doing it, the EAL piece is a part of it instead of being a completely separate thing. So keep that in mind when you have competing professional development needs. Of course, you want to foster collaboration, co-teaching models, and I'm not doing a lot of it in this session, but I could do a whole other session. And if folks are interested at the end, maybe the APLC, we can offer a session on programming, because that's a whole other thing, and how you organize for instruction. But that collaboration piece should be embedded in your schedules. And of course, safe spaces and monitoring the progress, which ties back to the data. And of course, inclusive practices, leading by example, building staff confidence, encouraging equity, and fostering that culture of learning. All kids can learn, and making sure that everybody feels welcome at the school, and that teachers are also feeling welcome on their teams. And that goes to the communication that not only goes amongst staff, but home and with the community home. How are those messages being sent to the home? How are they being received? Making sure that you've got some parent voice as well, so that you're getting some feedback about your communication. And of course, we want to celebrate diversity. I was really surprised when I got to my school that had been open for 6 years. Diwali was not celebrated. It was one of the main holidays of 70% of the kids. And I had not done a lot with Diwali. I've done a lot of cultural competence training, and I knew I didn't know everything, but I made sure I started talking to the kids and anybody staff who knew, so that we could start to do appropriate things with a holiday. So making sure that those kind of things are included, and really celebrating diversity. And then, of course, differentiation, which the session today we'll talk about a little bit, but also the next session that I'm doing today. And then inclusive decision making, so that making sure you're connecting with your school community as you're doing those decisions, especially when you may or may not know. And that's one of the biggest things with cultural competence, is saying, I don't know. I know I need to be aware of this. Where can I get some more information? Who can support my understanding and inform me, right? And people appreciate that you're making the effort. And then, of course, that shared vision. So unifying your team and having goals and practices and inspiring commitment and building trust. Those are all things that come with time, and you can't do them all at once. So I think starting with having that goal identified, so you've got that common vision and starting to talk about it, and then picking one or two things, and that unifies your team as you get going, and sharing those successes and struggles along the way, because you learn as much from your mistakes as you learn from your successes. So talking about them, and we're trying, and as we try, we're going to figure things out. So talking about all of that makes a great way to unite your team when you're all working together. And one of the hardest things I think people have is articulating the vision. So in my consulting work that I do, when they want me to come and help, and I'm like, well, how can I help? What do you need? A lot of times they don't know yet what they need help with. And I come in and I walk around the school, and then I start talking to the leaders about, this is what I observed. What do you think about this? What about this is our first goal? Like, we might want to have to organize for instruction, or we might take an example of one or two grades that are doing really, really good work, and that's the model we want to carry through the rest of the school. So, or build resources, whatever it is, making sure that it's really, really clear what you want, and then setting those goals. So leadership is really, really key. So for you to think about those three things that I went over quite quickly, what which one of those is your strength? And which one are you going to focus on for your area of growth? So I'm trying to help you zone in today. What do you need to work on and think about in the background as we're going through this session? So what's one thing you feel like you're doing well, and where do you want to go? What do you think your goal is? I don't know. Oh, we got a couple of people. The shared vision, okay. Supporting teachers to create an inclusive environment, okay. Our staff have a clear shared vision, okay. That's great, Alyssa. I'm sure you have a strength wall lead. Everybody has something that they're doing well, and then because you got to start from your own strengths, and then how do you get going with that shared vision? Yeah. And sometimes it's talking about all of the possibilities and doing a bit of a brainstorm, and then kind of grouping those ideas, and then go, this is one of our themes, this is another theme, and this is another one. What do we think is the first thing we need to work on? And then picking that together, and then having everybody be a part of deciding what are we going to try, and then that's the start of unifying your team, especially if you need that shared vision. Because and one of the ways when I do strategic planning with schools or groups of individuals, one of the exercises that we also do is we get everybody to say, well, what are all of our challenges? And what are all of the roadblocks and bumps? And that's kind of cathartic too, because everybody can get out that as well. But through that, you can see what some of the biggest roadblocks are, what some of the challenges are, and here's our goal. And so that way, when you design your plan, you keep those things in mind so that your plan is more successful, because it's an acknowledgement. Plus, everybody's had a chance to get out what the challenges are, so that everybody's feel like that's on the table and that's been heard. So think about that when you're trying to get your vision. You can do you know, what's going well at our school. You can do that stoplight activity, or what should we start doing, stop doing, what should we change? Or you can have one where we want to have a focus on our EAL learners. What are our goals for these kids? What do we want? What are our challenges right now? What are some roadblocks? Put those up, and then start working with that information to then come together as a group activity. So thinking about without leadership, none of this stuff happens. It's not going to magically happen without you deciding what you need to do. And at every school I work with, I start by asking just the question, well, how many kids do you have in your whole school? How many in each grade? How many are English as an additional language learners? How many are First Nation, Métis, and Inuit? How many kids have inclusive education needs? What else can you tell me about your population of students? What do you know? And some schools have a lot of information and a lot of data, and some schools know it, but they don't have it documented really. So it's getting your data is one of the biggest things. And so I really, really try and make sure that I'm gathering data and not just for data's sake, but to do something about it. And we'll talk about that. So this next few slides, I'm not going to go through them extensively, but there's many theorists who work off of data, so it's research based, and I just wanted to say that what I'm talking about is my lived experience, but also what the research says as well. So of course everybody knows Hattie, John Hattie, and using data to inform instruction is really, really key. Richard Allington, he uses literacy as well to shape the interventions to meet students' needs. So gathering data to do that. Formative assessments and literacy data to define the scaffolding, right? So it's not just summative or level B testing. It can be a lot of formative assessments can be used as well. Shanahan, of course, data can guide decision about instruction and monitoring progress. Carol Ann Tomlinson, the differentiation guru, to differentiate based on individual learners' needs. Fullen, making decisions to do collaborative practices among educators. And Dylan William, to inform teaching practices and improve student learning. So these are the common themes, right? That data should guide instructions, intervention, and programming. Data can be gathered both formatively and summatively. It's got to be actionable. And it's not just about compliance. You've got to spend your time gathering information that's meaningful in order to do something about it. So you want to make sure that instruction and programming are research-based and tailored to students' needs. So thinking about data, what data do you gather? So I have a survey, and I'm going to put a link to it, and you can do it at a later time. We're not going to spend a lot of time right now. In longer sessions, when I do this, we go through it, but that's like a half-day session. So this is a shorter session. But I want you to think about what types of data your school currently gathers, because you have some for sure. And some schools are doing a really, really good job of it. And if you're on this session, you want to feel affirmed that the practices you have in place are strong. So these are just some of the questions about your data protocols and processes. And so, and then who has access to the data. So sometimes teachers gather the data, but then it goes to admin and then the teachers don't see it again. So who's got access, or do the teachers have it and then administrators don't have it or know it? So all of those kinds of questions. And then what is working for your school and what do you need to improve on in your school? But it starts with data. So on this slide here, again, just in the chat box, what data are you gathering as a whole school? What are you working on using to inform your instructional decision making and your programming, your interventions, and your instruction? And then how do you share that data as a school or use that data? So are people collecting um, literacy data, reading, writing, math scores, report card marks in social studies or science or wellness? Are people looking at the diplomas and PATs or the other data that for the early years that are required to be gathered? What kind of data does your school use and look at? Thanks, Jennifer. Literacy assessments, benchmarking, coding, and home language. That's great. Reading, evaluation, lens, and C3. Awesome. So people have data, which is great. And then what are you doing with that data? So analysis of PATS diplomas, K to 3, Alberta Ed, grade 4 to 10 reading comprehension. Great. RCAT assessments and benchmarks. Great. Literacy, math, language proficiency, phonological awareness. All teachers and support staff have access to this information. Thank you, Alyssa. That's awesome. So you can see the kind of data people are gathering and using at their school. Benchmarks, government assessments, K to 5. Thanks, Michelle. So you've got a base of data, and then what are you doing with the data and how are you presenting it? So there's lots of different ways to do that and to have that information available. One of the things I do when I'm a school principal is I create a spreadsheet, and so it's kind of old school. There are applications you can buy that are way more intuitive and expensive too, but I do the cheap spreadsheet, and 3 times a year we update the spreadsheet with information. And so at a glance, it's the classroom profile. So this would be the data we collected in September or in October. So this is actual data from one of the classes at my last school. So we have benchmarks on the side, decoding and comprehension, writing vocabulary and writing sentence structure, MIPI, number sense, shape and space. So whatever assessments you have, we take that information and we put it on a spreadsheet. So then when we're planning for instruction, we have it at a glance. And the reason why we color code is so visually it's just easier to sort through the numbers. So yellow is not yet meeting. Orange is just below. Green is at grade level. Purple is slightly, or blue is slightly above, and then purple is higher above. So you can see at a glance, this is a diverse classroom. So when you're planning, and then when I'm an administrator, when we come back to teaching evaluation at the end or teacher observation, I have this classroom profile, I have the teacher's lesson plan. I come in and I look at the lesson and I see the diverse kids in the class. And so I can ask, what did you do to plan? Because you have 7 kids who are reading below grade level. How did you handle this social studies newspaper article that you wanted them to read, right? And I would expect that they would have done a differentiated reading for those kids given the scores. So it really, really helps, and to have it at a glance. Plus, if I'm a substitute teacher coming in and I have the class at a glance, then I know. So we also use this as our baseline data. So then when we come to the January report cards and we update everything, if things have moved, we change the numbers and the next section of the spreadsheet, and then at the end of the year. So then we can see the progress of the kids. So it really, really helps. So I'm just curious. I have some other spreadsheets from some other schools that I work with, just showing what they keep. If you type in the chat box, how do you as a school track your data? What are the applications? I'm always looking to increase my repertoire too. What are the tools and strategies? Do you use Dossier? Do you use some other applications to manage your learning data? Power School has different applications as well. It stores some of it and can write different reports depending on which SIS, your student information system, you use. See, the difference with color coding is just so much easier to see it. So this school uses Cat 4 and CFR for the upper grades. So I'm just waiting to see if anyone has. Okay, Power School, collect writing samples and reading and started their course. Yeah. And so like Alyssa, when you said all teachers have access to this information, so is it all in separate things or is it all in one place? What's the value of having a dashboard versus having some other things? So these are all things to start thinking about. And I'm just curious what schools do already. Because you want it to be usable, right? You spend a lot of time gathering data. And then if you have it, can you use it quickly and easily to do the work you need to do? Um, okay. So first of all, think about the data you want to gather, and some of you already have this data. So of course, depending on the grade, you might be doing pre-reading, but for late arrivers who you still might be doing phonemic awareness for late arrivers too. So again, depending on your age and your demographic, some of these things would come into play. But these are like the general things. Pre-reading, reading, pre-writing, writing, math, and effective filter stuff in terms of socio-emotional well-being, those kinds of things as well. We want to make sure we're aware of that whole child. So those are like the basics when I think about what do I want to capture on like a learner profile. And depending on the school or the focus, you may have some other areas as well. We also add in the report selected report card things to monitor as a sign of improvement throughout the year as a focus. So for all of this, you would decide what are your tools to gather data, and then what is the tool and the data that you want captured. So again, do you have a class list? Is it by hand? Is it, because that's what I used to do when I was teaching. I just had a handmade profile sheet, and then I moved to a spreadsheet. There's data programs, PowerSchool, etc. There's all kinds of ways to manage data and have it accessible. So it just depends on your school district, I guess, and what's already in play at your school. So, I'm just noticing that nobody shared from the last one, so I'll move forward on to some other information beyond data. But as you can see from these graphs, really having data and being able to look at it quickly and easily helps you with decisions that you're making. For example, in my last school with 770 EAL learners, we did reading assessments school-wide. We found out that 50% of our students were reading 3 or more grades below grade level. So that's grades 5 to 9. So in grade 9, we had was our lowest. We had kids that were reading at grade 7 level, and then half, so over 100 were reading at grade 6 or below. So you could predict what our PAT, our provincial achievement test scores would be, because reading is a part of everything. So we really focused in on reading, and we use that data to help inform our instruction in all subject areas. And we also used our data to inform our programming, so that I had a couple of teachers teaching English language arts at the same time. They would regroup for a novel study, for example, and do 2 different novel studies. We also had teachers be able to regroup for mathematics as well. And we would do and so it was very flexible in terms of how they're regrouping. I worked with a couple of schools in Southern Alberta, and one of the schools, the teachers chose based on their data, what they knew about their kids, how they wanted to regroup. We had some regroup for writing, the whole class for the rest of language arts, but they did writer's workshop separately. There were other classrooms that regrouped for mathematics. So lots of different options, but that's when you use your data and you set up your schedule so that these flexible learning opportunities by design because things are timetabled at similar times. And then you've got the programming, and then we piggyback our EAL sheltered classes on top of that so that there's fluid movement for a bunch of kids so that they're with the right teacher at the right time learning the right thing. So there's lots of options. And so when I come in and work at a school, looking at that data helps you see the patterns and the potential and what then you need to set up your timetable to do for you so that you can create these flexible groupings so that you can intervene and impact the learning. So that's one of the things we use data for. So I'm just going to move on. There's lots of slides in the slideshow about data. And so again, that reflection, what are you doing well? What do you want to improve? Pick one thing to focus on. And you can share in the chat just what you're doing well and what's one thing you want to focus on doing this year to gather. And think of this as like a 2 to 3 year journey. So maybe you're not gathering data yet, or you have data, but you could use it better. So that's your goal this year. And then for May and June, you want to use that data to inform your instructional design and your programming for next fall. Some of you may have already done that and be piloting a bunch of different programming initiatives so that because you have the data and you're using it, and now you're using it to inform how you're setting up the instructional design of your school. So what is one thing you're doing well, and what would be your area for growth this year with your data? So Alyssa says, we want to work on gathering data and using a consistent format across grades. Awesome. So from your other slide, I remember you have some data. So then it's just deciding what format do we want to put that data in and how are we going to consistently access it. And I found with the old school spreadsheet on a OneDrive or Google Drive, I was always worried that somebody would mess up the data, and it's actually worked out pretty good. And you can always undo things and go back to earlier versions. And every once in a while, we just downloaded the data just so we had a copy. But it was secure because it was in our school's drive as well, and with login access. So yeah. You created a class profile, Galen, and start the new year. That's great. So it'll be neat to see how that's going as people are getting used to using it and how they're doing it right. So, yes, and used more than just next week. And that's where that leadership piece, you keep coming back to it. And you say, so based on your information, how are you designing your lessons? You should be referring back to it. And then having that update time in January or your next reporting period, updating it, and then going, are we seeing any patterns of growth? Great. And we are for these kiddos not so much. Okay, so what are we going to do differently for this group of kiddos? And for these kiddos, what we're doing is working. Yeah, just work on gathering and sharing data. Okay, fair enough. Work on gathering data early in the month. So pick a plan. Again, start with what you're doing well and what you have. So, okay, we already do this. Great. Get it in a chart, get it in your student information system where, again, wherever that is. Easiest is a Excel spreadsheet with tabs that like I had my entire 1,000 kids on one spreadsheet with the different tabs for each class. So at a glance, I had that as a principal. So you can do lots of different things, but that's the easiest and cheapest and easiest way to start before you get into something more convoluted. And Waleed said, gathering Alberta Ed compliance, need to do more as we don't have much expertise. Yeah. And so when you gather your Alberta Ed data, since you have it, what format is it in? Again, are you using it? So you've gathered it, now fantastic. Now how do we use this data to inform what we're doing with the kiddos? All right. So once you have your information about your kids, and again, I didn't go into the programming here because there's so many different scenarios. So understand that in the middle of all of this is programming and organizing for instruction. And then now this is what are strategies that are effective in those classrooms or those programs. So whether I'm in my own little grade 6 classroom, whether I'm on a team with 6 other grade 6 teachers and we regroup for 1 or 2 subjects, or I regroup with 3 of those people for some things. Those are all options you can have. I also once programmed a middle school for the grade 7, 8s, and 9s. That 7A, 8A, and 9A all had English language arts at the same time, so that my beginners, because I didn't have a critical mass, my 5 beginners in grade 7, my 3 beginners in grade 8, my 8 beginners in grade 9, all of those kids could come to English language arts at the same time with an EAL teacher. So I had a 7, 8, 9 beginner EAL class because that made a class. So I just timetabled 7A, 8A, and 9A English Language Arts period 1. And then the EAL teacher was scheduled at the same time. So the kids didn't miss a beat. They just went to their teacher for that. And so it's starting to do things like that where you're maximizing on your use of staff. When I help people, it's not about having more teachers. There's no more teachers. Is how do we use our existing teachers better, differently? And that's creating those efficiencies on the timetable. And it takes a little bit longer to timetable, but it's sure worth it, because then you get to this situation now where you can really hone in on the classroom-based teaching strategies. So these are the top 10 teaching strategies, and they came from my research in my dissertation. So I interviewed teachers around Alberta, and these were the top strategies that we had. So I just want to share those with you. And so building background knowledge, of course, you always start with what people know already. And Cashin and Tyrrell and Cummins and Early are the folks that are the key researchers. Explicit language instruction, and that's when you're teaching language along content to ensure that there's the academic language development, and that's from Schlepper-Grell, Dutrow-Moran, Donnelly, and Rowe. Academic language development. So that is now further taking apart that language, and we talked about that in this my session yesterday, the introduction to English as an additional language learning, BICS and CALP, or social and academic language. You want to make sure you're developing both and really starting to focus on developing all the nuances with academic language. And Cummins, Beck-et-al, Coelho, and Durenka. Integrating language with content, which is the next session I'm doing, and that's Coelho and Durenka. Differentiation and scaffolding, Vygotsky, Krashen, and Tyrrell, and of course Carolyn Tomlinson. Another huge one that I focus on, there can be more research on that, is oracy and collaborative learning. Getting kids to talk and collaborate and supporting them in meaningful talk, and learning how to do that is huge. A lot of times kids don't talk enough in class, or they might be talking off subject, but in terms of when they're doing their work, learning how to really talk, because that's how they make meaning through that interaction. So oral language is critical, and those intentional talk opportunities. So Mercer and Dawes are the researchers from Cambridge, and that's where I do a lot of reading and from their work, Alexander and G. And then, of course, visuals, helping organize information, present information, making that visual connection are really important, from Muniz and Hill and Flynn. Culturally responsive teaching, of course, is critical as we're a globally diverse learning community, and making sure that kids can see themselves in the community. And that's from everything in terms of family composition, multi-generational, 2 dads, 2 moms, living with your aunties. There's making sure that there's that variety of family being shared examples. And so we want to make sure that there's a lot of consideration when choosing your resources, that it is culturally responsive. And of course, multilingual. So we talked about that yesterday, allowing kids to access their home language, encouraging it, showing them how to switch, them to use their home language to help them with their English. And also making sure that families know the importance of speaking home language at home and working through the homework in both languages with or more than one language if they have it at home. And then assessment as well. So making sure that it's you can account for their cultural and linguistic backgrounds as well to ensure fairness and accuracy. And that's sometimes when you're thinking of benchmarking and the language proficiency assessments or readiness for assessment. So we do have some of our provincial tests are waived until there's readiness as well. So those are some of the considerations that we make. So into the teaching strategies. Um, So the first one is that optimal learning environment for EAL. So you want to see the learning intention. So do the teachers have the goal of the lesson? So is the learning outcome been spoken about? Is it on the whiteboard? What are we learning in science today? Is it posted there? And then what's the language intention that goes with that is the EAL piece. So when I'm working with teachers that don't yet have a learning intention posted, and I'm coming in with my EAL lens going, how are they learning language in the lesson? I have to glue the language intention to the learning intention. So the first thing I'm going to work with the teachers on is, do you have your learning intention explicit? Because once I know that I'm going to be adding and subtracting two-digit numbers, I can get the language from that. Then I can work with the language. So once I'm really, really clear on that, if I know we're going to be understanding the process of photosynthesis, or we're going to be exploring types of ecosystems, or we're going to be looking at collectivism and social studies, if I know that that's our learning goal, then there's language that goes with that. So the language intention is critical for EAL learners, but you got to have the learning intention first to be able to pull the language from it. And then, of course, visuals are really, really critical for EAL learners, and all learners benefit from it. And one of the very first things I look at when I come into a classroom is if these walls can talk. Is it canned posters on the wall that have been up there for 5 years, or is it a dynamic classroom that's showcasing the learners and it's not all teacher created or made stuff? Kids can make the word walls and the pictures and the concept maps too. How is that all being addressed? And I know you can only have so much chart paper on walls with fire hazards and all those kinds of things too, but how do you manage what's going up on the walls and how the walls are being used to visibly display the learning? And that's really, really important. And so one of the things I say to people is like, order some chart paper because you're going to be putting stuff on the walls or using your whiteboards. But what is space that you have actively to capture the learning and get those anchor charts? So those are really important. Use of scaffolds are key. So word banks, sentence frames, graphic organizers, making the content accessible. And then other scaffolds like different levels of readings, different tools and strategies in terms of reference materials that kids can use are also different scaffolds. Then there is differentiation. So is it a one size fits all lesson? Is everybody learning the same thing in the same way? Or are we all doing the same science experiment, but these four kids have been paired together and the teacher's helping them or around them more to assist? Or these kids are in mixed groups by design to do something? Does one particular group have some scaffolds in terms of how to write it up? Do some other kids have a different write-up format because they need something different? Do some kids have an extension activity because the experiment and the documentation is going to take them one class and it's going to take the rest of the class two or three and they need an extension activity? So all of those things, when you're looking at, yes, we're all learning about the viscosity of fluids, and this is an experiment we're conducting, but that same experiment might need to have some scaffolds and supports and some differentiation for different types of learners in your classroom. And that's what you start looking for from that, the good to great teacher. The master teacher is starting to really know their learners and add in these other aspects. So they're intentionally grouping, they're providing the supports and the scaffolds so that everybody can be learning about viscosity and everybody can working as independently as possible to understand the learning outcomes. And so that is really, really key, that effectiveness of instruction. Um, Collaborative learning opportunities, again, with oral language. How are the peer interactions structured? That's really, really important. And having kids have the opportunity to talk and wrestle with the content, explaining it, teaching another person is the number one way of learning. So if they can explain it to a peer and discuss it and talk about it, that is going to really consolidate their understanding. And then back to the differentiation alignment of the tasks with learner profiles. So I mentioned my school had about half my grade nines reading 3 or more grades below grade level. So whenever there was a social studies, science, text and phys ed health, if they were in art and they were doing a historical art project where there's a lot of reading, I would expect to see some different levels of reading because we knew their reading level. So we would expect that the teachers would, now with AI, to run that content and be able to differentiate the level of reading. So they're still on the same topic, but the reading is accessible for those kids, and we'd expect that. So what are we using our learner profile information to help them? Same with if it's a beginner EAL who has cognitively got the concept of viscosity, but they need really simple sentences and a word bank and more supports. Has that been provided while they're doing that science experiment? um, Teacher engagement and support. So, is the teacher interacting? Are they roving? Are they supporting the groups? What does that look like? Is the teacher sitting back at their desk while the kids are busy working? And is there a lineup at the desk? We want to see more effective use of the teacher's time and the student's time engaged with the different phases of learning versus the sage on the stage behind the desk style. We want to see more of that teacher facilitator of learning. So here is an example of a teacher rubric that I have for that optimal learning environment. And it's like on a 5-point scale. And those are the criteria as described before. And this is a draft copy that I was working on with some leaders at some other schools because they were working, well, what does effective teaching and learning look like in an EAL classroom? And so here's the learning intention, the language intention, use of visuals, use of scaffolds. So if we look at that one in particular, like the use of visuals. So at the beginning level, some visuals are present and support basic understanding of content, limited or few visuals on classroom walls. Developing. Visuals are used in, sorry, my writing's really tiny on my computer, so it's really hard for me to see. Visuals are used in key moments and help clarify concepts for learners. Visuals on classroom walls have minimal connection to the content. So that's when you might have the old posters or those kind of things that aren't really related to what's going on right now. Proficient. Visuals, there's anchor charts, word walls, and images, and they're integrated and consistently support understanding. Student work is displayed, and there are some documentation of the learning process. So that would be as you're building, there's a concept map, and as the kids are drawing, um, the water cycle, some of those images are on the wall too as the concept map is being developed. Accomplished. A variety of culturally responsive visuals are thoughtfully incorporated to enhance comprehension and engagement. Student exemplars are displayed with uh, reflections, and the learning process is documented. And then level 5, that exemplary, that master teacher, visuals are expertly integrated, uh, tailored to learner needs, and used dynamically to deepen understanding. Throughout the process of learning, student exemplars are used to support feedback and reflection. The learning process is documented throughout the learning cycle. So that's like, pretty high level. And when I'm in there, I will take a 3, 4, or 5. Like that's what I'm looking for is is really seeing that at least there's that start of the visuals and then working with the teachers to incorporate it more. And sadly, I find a lot of classes are or sometimes the 2 or the 1. Where there's not much going on visually to support the learning in the class. And I know sometimes I'm not in this classroom all the time. I move around or there's restrictions. So I know there's some exceptions, but when there's not, there's no reason why the visual shouldn't be there to support the learning. And it shouldn't be more work, it should be part of it. So as you're creating things, as you're you can draw it on the chart paper. You can have kids draw it on the chart paper. You can have kids make the words for the word walls and the images to go with it. And when you're putting something on the whiteboard, instead of on the whiteboard, you pick the chart paper so that you can hang it up on the wall. And or you take something from your PowerPoint that's really, really important and key, and you print it and you have that on the wall. So just trying to work smarter, not harder, but for sure include the visuals. So that's an example of some of those categories. And then I just wanted to talk about collaborative learning opportunities as well. So the level 1 collaborative opportunities are limited to occasional group tasks. Level 2 collaborative opportunities are present and support basic peer interactions. Proficient. Level 3 collaborative tasks are integrated, encouraging meaningful peer interactions and shared learning. 4, collaborative learning is consistently provided with tasks designed to foster teamwork, dialogue, and mutual support. And 5, exemplary collaborative learning is a core feature with rich, meaningful opportunities of learners to work together, share knowledge, and build language skills. And in one of the classrooms I was observing in Asia in the last year, there was a master teacher in that classroom, and she was having the kids do like a book club where they were reading a novel together. She had the differentiation, but she had structures and routines that fostered collaboration. The groups, people had roles, they knew what the roles were. They read out loud together. They problem solved through words they needed to figure out or making meaning. They documented as they went. They had accountability built in. And they wrote a summary at the end, and then they were responsible for sharing back. And each class, when they focused on a different element of literacy, that would be the lesson part where she'd talk about it, explain it, and then when they all went to their individual books, they were to look for evidence of that there as they were reading. So it was really interesting when you see teachers that are at that level, and the engagement in the classroom was amazing. There aren't any discipline or engage. The kids are all in it. They're all accountable and they know and understand what to do, but the learning is there because they're talking. So that collaborative learning opportunity is really, really key. And thinking about when you're in there with uh, with students, when I'm a principal coming in to observe teachers, those are often my 2 things when I don't focus on everything, but if they can get some visuals up and if they can increase the collaboration in the classroom, those are 2 big wins for the learning environment overall, and they have some great applications. And of course, there's the differentiation piece too, but sometimes I start with those 2 because those are quick quicker wins, and then the differentiation takes more time and support to help those teachers find those tools and resources to be able to do that, and the classroom management side of it. So I just wanted to point out those two things. So those are uh, that's the teacher rubric. So that takes us to the end of our session. I guess I finished a couple of 15 minutes early here. I thought I wasn't going to have enough time, and then I ended up finishing a little bit early. So hopefully you can go to the survey and fill out any comments you have about the session. And if you want to hang on and ask any questions, I will turn off the recording and we can discuss your particular context, or we can talk about anything I suggested. I will also put the teacher survey link in as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'll make sure that the link to the teacher observation survey is available for you to use if you want. And I will say that if you want to use the draft observation guide, what I would do with it as well is go over it with the teachers. It is a draft, and get their